I suspected my wife was planning a divorce, so I moved my assets. 2 weeks later, she asked me to sign papers at dinner. I looked at her and said, "Funny, I was about to ask you the same." Her smile dropped, the waiter froze, and my lawyer walked in behind me. I don't know when exactly my marriage started to fall apart. It wasn't like a single, defining moment where everything shattered in an instant. No, it was more like a slow leak. The kind you don't notice at first, until one day, you wake up and realize the floor beneath you is completely flooded. Maybe it started when Camille got her promotion at the firm. She was working longer hours, constantly on her phone, and always too tired to talk when she got home. Or maybe it was before that, when we stopped going on dates, stopped making plans for the future, stopped laughing at the little things. Somewhere along the way, we had become strangers. And maybe I could have accepted that. Maybe I would have let it play out, hoping we'd find our way back to each other. But then, 2 weeks ago, I saw the text. I wasn't snooping. I swear I wasn't. But when her phone buzzed while she was in the shower, the screen lit up with a message that read, "The papers will be ready soon. I'll let you know when it's time." I felt something in my gut twist so hard I thought I might be sick. Papers. Divorce papers. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Camille had been distant, but I never thought she was actually planning to leave. And she sure as HLL hadn't said anything to me about it. The second I heard the water turn off, I put the phone back exactly where it was and walked out of the bedroom. My hands were shaking, my breathing unsteady. I sat on the couch, trying to collect myself, but my mind wouldn't stop spinning. She was planning this, and she hadn't told me. She was waiting for the right moment to blindside me. That was the moment I made a decision. She wanted to play games? Fine. I'd play too, and I'd win. The first thing I did was call my lawyer. Eric had been a friend of mine for years, and he wasn't just good, he was ruthless. When I explained the situation, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he exhaled sharply. "James, if she's already talking to a lawyer, you're behind. We need to move fast. Tell me what to do," I said. And just like that, the game was on. First, I moved my liquid assets. Most of my money was in investments, stocks, and real estate, but anything that could be transferred, I moved into a private trust under my brother's name. I restructured my business finances so that, on paper, it looked like I was barely making a profit. Then, I pulled my biggest move yet. I created a shell company and funneled my most valuable assets through it. If Camille thought she was going to walk away with half of everything, she was in for a nasty surprise. By the time I was done, it looked like I was drowning in debt. Camille wasn't going to get a dime. I waited. 2 weeks passed, and I watched her closely. She had no idea that I knew. She still acted the same, cold, distracted, but not suspicious. Some nights, she'd come home late, reeking of expensive perfume that wasn't hers. I didn't ask questions. I didn't accuse. I just smiled and pretended everything was normal. Then, on a Friday evening, she finally made her move. She came home earlier than usual, dressed in that navy blue dress I used to love. She leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, a careful smile on her lips. "I made a reservation at La Vigna," she said. La Vigna, our old spot. The place where we used to celebrate birthdays and anniversaries, where I once got down on one knee and asked her to spend the rest of her life with me. I almost laughed at the irony. Instead, I smiled. "Sounds perfect." The restaurant was dimly lit, elegant, the kind of place where people spoke in hushed voices over candlelight. I arrived first, dressed sharp, my nerves steady. I ordered a whiskey and waited. Camille walked in 15 minutes later, smiling like she hadn't already made up her mind to leave me. She sat down, ordered her usual glass of red, and for the first few minutes, we pretended. We made small talk about work, about the weather, about everything except what we were really here for. Then, finally, she reached into her bag and pulled out a thick envelope. She placed it on the table between us, her fingers lightly tapping the edge. "James," she said softly, "I need to talk to you about something." I took a slow sip of my whiskey. "Yeah." She hesitated. "This isn't easy for me to say, but I think we both know this marriage isn't working anymore." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh." She nodded, swallowing hard like she was trying to summon tears that wouldn't come. "I still care about you. I always will. But we've grown apart, and I think it's time we both move on." I tilted my head, pretending to consider her words. "You think so?" She slid the envelope toward me. "I met with a lawyer a few weeks ago. We've drawn up an agreement that I think is fair to both of us." I stared at the envelope for a long moment. Then I reached into my own jacket, pulled out an envelope of my own, and placed it on top of hers. Camille's smile faltered. "What's this?" she asked. I leaned forward, lowering my voice just enough that she had to strain to hear. "Funny," I said. "I was about to ask you the same thing." Her face went pale. The waiter, who had just walked up to refill her wine, froze mid-pour. And then Eric walked in behind me. Camille's eyes darted to him, then back to me. "What the HLL is this?" I shrugged. "Go ahead. Open it." She hesitated, then slowly lifted the flap and pulled out the neatly prepared documents inside. I watched as her eyes scanned the pages, her lips pressing into a thin line. "This," This isn't possible, she muttered. What did you? Eric smiled. Oh, it's very possible. You see, Camille, James was already prepared for this little stunt of yours. And unfortunately for you, there's not much left for you to take. She shook her head, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. No, I saw the bank statements. I know what he's worth. I smiled. You knew what I was worth 2 weeks ago. Her breath hitched. Eric pulled out another stack of documents and placed them neatly in front of her. As of now, Mr. Whitaker is, unfortunately, in a bit of a financial mess. Most of his assets are tied up in long-term investments. There's very little left to divide. She stared at the documents, her jaw tightening. For the first time that night, she looked completely, utterly lost. You son of a BTCH, she whispered. I shrugged. You should have told me about the text. Silence stretched between us. Then, slowly, she exhaled, her shoulders dropping. So that's it, huh? You screw me over, and I walk away with nothing. I took another sip of whiskey, savoring the burn. You walked away a long time ago, Camille. I'm just making it official. Camille didn't move for a long moment. She just sat there, staring down at the documents in front of her like she could change them into changing. Like she could force the numbers to rearrange themselves into something more favorable. The waiter, still frozen in place, glanced between the two of us, then quickly turned and walked away, sensing the tension in the air. Finally, she spoke, her voice quieter than before. You really thought of everything, didn't you? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Her hands curled into fists on the table. You've been planning this. How long? I let out a slow breath, tilting my head. You tell me, Camille. When did you start planning? Her lips pressed together. I could see the calculations running through her mind. She was trying to figure out how this happened, how she had been so sure she was in control, only to find out she was playing a rigged game. For the first time in years, I had the upper hand. And she knew it. She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms, her expression unreadable. I don't get it. Why do all this? If you knew I wanted a divorce, why not just let me go? I almost laughed. Let you go. I shook my head. Camille, this wasn't about letting you go. You were never planning on just leaving. You were planning on gutting me in the process. Her nostrils flared. That's not true. I lifted a brow. Isn't it? I reached for my whiskey, taking my time as I spoke. You weren't just trying to leave, Camille. You were setting yourself up for a payday. You wanted half of everything. Maybe more. Alimony, the house, my business assets. Don't even try to deny it. She opened her mouth, then closed it, clenching her jaw. That's what I thought. She exhaled sharply, running a hand through her hair. Jesus, James. Do you even hear yourself? You make it sound like I'm some gold digging. Don't. I cut in, my voice low. Don't sit there and act like you were being fair. If you really just wanted out, you would have told me. But you didn't. You planned this in secret. You met with lawyers behind my back. You thought I'd be too blind, too stupid to see it coming. She looked away, her jaw tight. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. What changed, Camille? She blinked. What? I tilted my head. When did you decide you were done? When did you start planning this? For the first time all night, I saw something crack in her expression. A flicker of hesitation. A moment of doubt. And then she said, does it matter? I studied her face, searching for any trace of the woman I used to know. The woman I built a life with. Maybe it didn't matter. Maybe, in the end, this was just who she had become. She let out a bitter laugh. You think you've won, don't you? I smiled. I know I have. And just like that, the conversation shifted. The tension in the air changed. Because now Camille wasn't just hurt, she was angry. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her wine glass. You're a real piece of work, James. I took another sip of whiskey, unfazed. Right back at you. She stared at me for a long time, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she picked up the envelope of divorce papers I had given her. She flipped through them, skimming over the terms, and then she laughed. Not the soft, polite laugh I had grown used to over the years. This was different. Sharper. Meaner. I frowned. Something funny? She glanced up at me, a smirk tugging at the corner of her lips. Oh, James. You really think you've won, don't you? My stomach twisted, but I didn't let it show. She set the papers down, folded her hands over them, and looked me dead in the eye. You were always so good with numbers. Always planning, always calculating. But you forgot one thing. I kept my expression steady. And what's that? She leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. I never play a game I don't know I can win. And just like that, I felt it. I stared at Camille, my grip tightening slightly around my whiskey glass. Her smirk was small, but it was there. Confidence. Too confident. She was bluffing. She had to be. I had covered every angle, every loophole. My assets were moved, my finances locked down, and my business restructured beyond recognition. There was no way she could touch anything. So why did she look like she had already won? I kept my face calm, my voice steady. That's so. She took another slow sip of her wine, watching me over the rim of her glass. Then she set it down, folded her arms, and exhaled like she was enjoying every second of this. You're smart, James. I'll give you that. Most men would have walked in here completely blindsided, but not you. You saw it coming. And you made your move before I could make mine. She tilted her head. That must have felt good, huh? I didn't respond. She took that as an invitation to keep talking. You really think I was after your money? That I was sitting at home, rubbing my hands together like some villain, plotting how to take you for everything you had? I lifted a brow. Weren't you? She scoffed. God, James. You always did love a good worst-case scenario, didn't you? You see the world in numbers, assets, and risks. But people. She let out a soft laugh. You never really understood people. I wasn't going to let her rattle me. Enlighten me. Then, I said, leaning back in my chair. If you weren't after my money, why the secret meetings? Why the text? Why will the papers be ready soon? Her smirk flickered. Just for a second. Got you. She reached for her wine again, buying herself a moment before answering. Because I wanted out, James. And I knew you'd make it ugly if I told you first. I let out a short laugh. Ugly? You're the one who planned to hit me with a divorce over dinner. She shrugged. Would you have preferred it if I left the papers on the kitchen counter and sent you a text instead? I clenched my jaw. At least it would have been honest. She shook her head, eyes full of something I couldn't quite place. Pity? No. Something sharper than that. Honest. James, if we're talking about honesty, maybe we should talk about what you were doing 2 weeks ago while I was at work. I froze. Just for half a second. Just long enough for my fingers to tense around my drink. Her eyes flicked to my hand, catching the movement. Then her smile widened. There it is, she said softly. That moment of doubt. I was waiting for that. I forced my expression to stay neutral. I don't know what you're talking about. She laughed again, shaking her head. You really thought I wouldn't notice? I glanced at Eric. He didn't react, didn't shift in his seat. If he was worried, he wasn't showing it. Good. At least one of us was still in control here. I turned back to Camille. Notice what exactly? She traced the rim of her wine glass with one finger, taking her time. Drawing this out. I might not be a financial genius like you, James, but I do know how to read people. And the second you started being too nice, I knew something was up. I narrowed my eyes. She smirked. You thought I didn't notice how suddenly you stopped asking me about work? Or how you stopped getting annoyed when I came home late? She tilted her head. That wasn't you being understanding. That was you waiting. Calculating. Planning. She exhaled, looking almost impressed. So I did some digging. I kept my expression unreadable. Camille leaned forward slightly. Did you really think moving everything to a shell company would be enough? My stomach twisted, but I didn't let it show. She saw something in my face, something small, but enough to make her smirk again. Oh, James. She clicked her tongue. You really thought you had this all wrapped up, didn't you? I didn't answer. She tapped the stack of divorce papers in front of her. See, while you were busy playing chess, I was playing something else. And unlike you, I wasn't relying on numbers. I held her gaze. Then what were you relying on? She smiled, slow and careful. People. I didn't like where this was going. She lifted her glass again, swirling the wine lazily. Tell me, James, how well do you really know the people who work for you? My grip on my drink tightened. Camille's smile widened. Oh, she said, her voice light. You look a little pale. Something wrong. I stayed silent. Inside, my mind was racing. Who? Who the HLL did she get to? My lawyer? No. Eric was solid. He'd been with me for years. My accountant. My financial advisor? Someone at the bank? No. No. I had triple-checked everything. Every single person who had touched my assets, every lawyer I'd consulted, every transaction I had made. It had all been airtight. Hadn't it? I forced myself to stay calm. You're bluffing. She tilted her head. Am I? A long silence stretched between us. Then she leaned in, her voice just above a whisper. You should really check your offshore accounts. My heart slammed against my ribs. I kept my face steady, kept my hands still. But inside, something lurched. Because I had offshore accounts. A handful of them, set up through my shell company. They were perfectly legal, perfectly protected, hidden behind layers of corporate paperwork. Or at least, they were supposed to be. Camille's smile was razor sharp. I bet you checked your local assets, your investments, your business accounts. But you never thought to check what's happening in places like, oh, the Caymans, did you? I swallowed. That's bullcrap. She shrugged. Maybe. I glanced at Eric. He was still calm, still steady. But there was something in his eyes now, a flicker of concern. Camille leaned back in her chair, stretching slightly like she was enjoying herself. You were always so sure you were the smartest person in the room, James. And maybe you were. But you underestimated me. I stayed silent, waiting. Then she smiled wider, shaking her head. You should check your accounts first thing in the morning. She lifted her glass. To never be played again, she said, mocking my own words back at me. Then she took a slow sip, watching me over the rim. And for the first time all night, I felt like I might have actually lost control of the game. My pulse pounded in my ears, but I didn't let it show. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. I took a slow sip of my whiskey, keeping my expression calm, my movements measured. If Camille had anything solid, if She wouldn't be playing games. She would have hit me with it already. She was bluffing. She had to be. Eric cleared his throat, finally breaking his silence. If you have something to say, Camille, I suggest you say it. Otherwise, this conversation is a waste of everyone's time. She turned her gaze to him, her smirk unfazed. Oh, Eric. Always so professional. You must be loving this. He didn't respond. Camille leaned back, folding her arms. All right, fine. Let's cut to it, shall we? She exhaled and tapped her manicured nails against the table. James, tell me, what would you do if, let's say, certain financial movements were flagged for review? I didn't blink. Review by whom? Her lips curved. Oh, I don't know. Regulatory bodies. Banking authorities. I kept my face neutral, but my mind was moving a mile a minute. No way. I had structured everything perfectly. The offshore transfers had been handled through a series of intermediaries, legal, discreet. There was nothing illegal, nothing that would draw real attention. Unless someone made it look suspicious. Camille tilted her head, watching me, waiting for a crack in my composure. Hypothetically, of course. Eric shifted in his seat, his eyes narrowing slightly. Hypothetically speaking, Camille, that would require a direct complaint or an insider tip. He smiled coolly. Which would be interesting, considering James hasn't done anything illegal. Camille hummed. Oh, of course not. James would never. I set my glass down and leaned forward. What did you do? She traced the rim of her wine glass, pretending to think. Nothing much. Just had a few conversations. With the right people. My stomach twisted. She met my gaze, and for the first time all night, she wasn't just playing. There was something else there now, something colder. You were always so obsessed with protecting yourself, James, she murmured. So obsessed with winning. But the problem is, you don't see the whole board. I stayed silent, letting her talk. You move assets, you create shell companies, you bury everything under layers of paperwork and corporate nonsense. And you think that's enough. But you forgot something. She took a slow sip of her wine, watching me the whole time. Then she set the glass down and smiled. Perception. My breath stayed steady. But inside, my mind was spinning. You might have done everything by the book, she continued. But if someone were to, I don't know, raise questions? Drop a few breadcrumbs in the right places. She shrugged. Suddenly, those offshore transfers don't look so innocent, do they? She was bluffing. She had to be. But what if she wasn't? I had seen it before. I had advised clients on it before. Financial investigations didn't require actual wrongdoing, just the appearance of it. The moment certain words, fraud, tax evasion, asset concealment, got whispered in the right ears, suddenly you were under a microscope. And once that happened, it didn't matter if you were clean. It only mattered what people thought they could find. I kept my voice even. You're playing a dangerous game, Camille. Her smile widened. So are you. Eric exhaled sharply, shaking his head. You don't have anything, Camille. You're trying to scare him. She turned to him, raising a brow. Am I? She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. With deliberate slowness, she tapped the screen a few times, then turned it toward me. I stared. It was an email. A forwarded one. From a banking compliance officer. Subject, notification of transaction review, preliminary inquiry. My stomach dropped. Camille clicked her tongue. Whoops. I didn't move. Didn't let my face betray me. But inside, everything was on fire. She had actually done it. She had actually reported my financial movements. And now, someone was looking. I leaned back, swallowing down the heat rising in my chest. This won't stick, I said. They'll review it, see there's nothing wrong, and drop it. Camille shrugged, slipping her phone back into her bag. Maybe. Or maybe they'll keep digging. Maybe they'll start asking questions. She smiled. And maybe they'll find something you missed. My fists clenched under the table. Eric, to his credit, didn't react. He simply adjusted his tie and sighed. This is a desperate move, Camille. She laughed softly. No, Eric. This is a counter move. I stared at her, my heartbeat steadying as I forced myself to think. She had made her play. She had fired her shot. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I smiled slowly, tilting my head. You think this is enough to beat me? Her eyes gleamed. I don't need to beat you, James. She leaned in, her voice quiet, deadly. I just need to make you sweat. And for the first time that night. She had. I didn't sleep that night. After Camille walked out of La Vigna, leaving me with that smug little smirk of hers, Eric and I sat there in silence. He nursed his drink while I stared down at the table, my mind racing through 1,000 different possibilities. She's bluffing, Eric said after a moment. Maybe, I muttered. But she had that email. Eric exhaled through his nose, rubbing his temple. A preliminary inquiry isn't a full investigation. It's nothing. Yet, I echoed. That was the problem. The moment my financial movements were flagged, someone would start looking. And Camille knew it. Even if everything was clean, the perception of something shady could be just as damaging. I clenched my jaw. She was trying to put me in a position where I'd have to settle. Camille wasn't after money anymore. She wanted control. She wanted to see me squirm. But two could play that game. By the time I walked into my office the next morning, I had a plan. Give me everything you can on Camille, I told Eric over the phone. Every case she's worked on, every financial decision she's made in the last 2 years. I want to know who she's been talking to, who she's been meeting with, everything. On it, he said. I spent the rest of the morning making phone calls. First, I called my bank, my investment firms, and my offshore contacts. I needed to get ahead of the inquiry before it spiraled into something bigger. A few well-placed explanations, a couple of strategic meetings, and soon, any whiff of suspicion would be smoothed over. Then, I called an old friend, Mason Porter, investigative consultant, the kind of guy who found things that other people wanted buried. James, he greeted me. Been a while. I need some information, I said. On. My soon-to-be ex-wife. A low whistle. You got a name? Camille Whitaker. A pause. I'll get back to you in 24 hours. Good. That was all I needed. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling. Camille wanted to make me sweat? Fine. But before this was over, she was going to learn exactly who she was dealing with. By the next day, I had everything I needed. Mason's report landed on my desk at noon. I skimmed through it quickly, my pulse steady. And then I saw it. A name. Philip Greaves. I froze. Then I read it again, slower this time, my lips pressing into a thin line. Philip Greaves was a senior partner at Hastings & Greaves, a high-profile law firm specializing in corporate litigation. Powerful, connected, and Camille's direct superior. And according to Mason's report, Camille had been having an affair with him. It wasn't just whispers. Mason had proof. Hotel receipts, credit card transactions, photographs. I sat back, letting out a slow breath. So this was why Camille had been so eager to leave. It wasn't just that she wanted out of the marriage. She had someone else waiting. Someone powerful. Someone she thought could protect her. I smiled. Because she had made a mistake. A big one. 2 days later, I invited Camille to lunch. She hesitated when I called, probably wondering what I was up to. But curiosity got the best of her, and at exactly 1 o'clock, she walked into the private dining room I had reserved. She was dressed sharply, her confidence back in full force. James, she greeted, sliding into the seat across from me. Camille. I gestured for the waiter to pour her a glass of wine. I thought we should talk. Her lips twitched. Oh, are you ready to negotiate? I leaned back, smiling. Something like that. She watched me carefully as I pulled a folder from my briefcase and slid it across the table. She hesitated, then opened it. The moment her eyes landed on the contents, I saw it. The flicker of panic. She flipped through the pages, her fingers tightening around the edges. Where did you get this? She asked, voice quieter now. Does it matter? I replied smoothly. She looked up at me, trying to regain her composure. So what? You dug through my personal life? That's low. James, even for you. I tilted my head. Low. I gestured to the papers in front of her. You're the one sleeping with your boss. And last I checked, Hastings & Greaves has a strict non-fraternization policy. Camille's expression flickered. Bingo. Tell me, Camille. I continued, my voice calm. How do you think Philip's wife would feel about this? Or better yet, the board of directors at your firm? Her throat bobbed. You wouldn't. I smiled wider. Wouldn't I? Silence stretched between us. Camille looked down at the folder again, her fingers twitching slightly. She knew what this meant. If this got out, her career would be over. Philip would cut ties with her immediately to save himself, and she'd be left with nothing. For the first time in this entire game, Camille had no moves left. She swallowed hard, her voice carefully controlled. What do you want? I leaned forward, resting my arms on the table. You're going to withdraw your claim to any of my assets. No alimony, no settlement. You walk away with what you came into this marriage with. Nothing more, nothing less. Her jaw clenched. And, I added, you retract whatever complaint you made about my finances. Immediately, her fingers tightened around the folder. I could see the war in her eyes, pride versus self-preservation. In the end, self-preservation won. Fine, she muttered. I'll sign. I exhaled, letting my smile widen. Good choice. She pushed the folder back toward me, then stood. I hope you enjoy this little victory, James, she said coolly. I picked up my glass, swirling the amber liquid inside. Oh, I will. She hesitated for half a second, then turned and walked away. And just like that, it was over. Later that night, as I sat in my office sipping whiskey, I picked up my phone and dialed a number. Mason answered on the second ring. Everything go as planned. Better than planned, I said. Send everything to Philip's wife. Anonymously, Mason chuckled. Cold. Just tying up loose ends, I murmured. I hung up, leaned back, and smiled. Camille had tried to play me. She had thought she could corner me, trap me. But in the end, she was just another piece on the board. And I had played the game better.